When a soul that has suffered for too long begins to grow strong, the first sound is not celebration, it's the silent tremor that ripples through the one who once controlled them. The narcissist feels this shift like an earthquake in their psyche, because their entire world is built upon a single principle. I exist only as long as you reflect me. But when you stop reflecting, when your gaze becomes calm, when your voice no longer trembles, they no longer know who they are. And in that exact moment, panic begins, an ancient fear of dissolving in the truth you no longer hide. Carl Jung once said, "The shadow that we do not become conscious of will become our fate." To the narcissist, you are the light shining upon that fate. They cannot bear it when that light illuminates the parts of themselves they've denied, the weakness, the emptiness, the desperate hunger for validation. So they will not retreat quietly. They will make one final attempt, driven by the survival instinct of a collapsing ego. They will feign illness, cry, guilt trip you, romanticize the past, twist truth into lies, and turn your own kindness into a trap. They do not attack to win. They attack to pull you back into the fog where they do not have to face themselves. But what they fail to understand is this: once you have seen, you cannot unsee. This is not a battle between two people. It is a battle between two states of consciousness. One survives through illusion. The other seeks freedom through truth. And when you choose truth, you step off their stage and return to the real world, where no one has to perform to be loved. When the mirror shatters, their image collapses with it. Yet, instead of looking into the shards to rediscover who they are, they choose another path to try and pull you back. They believe that if they can make you waver, doubt yourself, or feel guilty, they will be able to breathe again. Carl Jung also said, "A weak ego always seeks to control others because it cannot control itself." And that is precisely the most dangerous stage. When you become strong, they lose control, but not their talent for manipulation. They will not attack head-on. They will lurk, observe, and strike softly at the parts of you still unhealed. Your empathy, your memories, your fear of being unkind, your need for validation. What comes next is not a storm of rage, but 10 subtle psychological strikes. The dying ego's final moves, disguised as affection, vulnerability, and sincerity. Each move is crafted not to destroy you by force, but by confusion, to make you question yourself, lower your boundaries, and willingly walk back into the prison you just escaped. Today, we will explore the 10 final tactics of the narcissist. 10 forms of manipulation disguised as love, nostalgia, and goodness. You will see that each one mirrors a secret fear within them. The fear of being seen, the fear of losing admiration, the fear of accountability, and the deepest of all, the fear of being alone with their own soul. Tactic 1. The mirror crack. There is no sound that announces this moment. It begins on a perfectly ordinary day. You say something seemingly harmless, draw a soft boundary, or simply stop reacting as you used to. But to a narcissist, that is a psychological earthquake, because their entire world is built on one thing: reflection. And when you stop reflecting, the mirror begins to crack. They feel this fracture not through logic, but through instinct, as if a creature living inside the mirror suddenly saw its shimmering surface splinter and no longer knew who it was without your gaze to define it. The narcissist doesn't truly exist as a stable being. They are a construction of images, a persona, what Carl Jung called the social mask, glued to their face so they never have to see their own shadow. That inflated ego survives through the eyes of others, especially yours. As long as you admire them, they exist. As long as you fear them, they hold power. As long as you react, they have meaning. But when you fall silent, when your gaze grows calm and your energy no longer flows toward them, it's not just that you've changed, it's that their entire ego structure begins to collapse. You might expect them to quietly walk away. They won't. They will cling to you in every way possible, not out of love, but out of terror at being erased from reality. When you stop reflecting, they lose the boundary between self and nothingness. In psychoanalytic terms, this is called the collapse of the mirror self. It throws them into a state of primal panic, like a child losing its mother in the dark, except that unlike the child, they're not looking for love, they're looking for control. You'll start noticing the first signs of this crisis. Contradictory phrases like, "You've changed, you're so cold now," mixed with, "I just want you to be happy." A hand reaching out in apology, but eyes filled with rage, a heartfelt message whose words drip with hidden guilt. This is the first strike of the mirror crack, the redefinition of reflection. They will try to reshape you, pull you back into the old pattern, provoke guilt, and lure you into explaining yourself. They don't need your love, they just need your movement. Because every time you react, their image glimmers for a little longer. Carl Jung once said, "We do not see others as they are. We see them as a reflection of what we have not yet recognized in ourselves." To the narcissist, you were the mirror of all the light they refused to own: kindness, patience, truth. Yet they also projected onto you everything they couldn't face: weakness, fear, envy, emptiness. You became the parallel screen between their darkness and light. And when you start withdrawing from that role, all the shadows they once threw at you rebound. They can't bear that, so they'll try anything to make you carry their shadow again. They might suddenly become strangely gentle, say the apology you dreamed of hearing, tell stories of regret, even speak of healing and positive energy. But if you look closely, you'll notice the eyes lack depth, only the desperate fear of being forgotten. At this point, they don't truly want to change, they just want to pull you back into the old role, the mirror that kept them from falling into their own abyss. What makes the mirror crack such a powerful first tactic is that it doesn't use force, it uses emotional memory. They know exactly which buttons to press. Compassion, nostalgia, your desire to understand and save. They weaponize the image of the person you once loved to revive your old emotional reflexes. And the moment you respond even with a single text, a single explanation, the broken glass is patched together, and they can breathe again for a little while longer inside their illusion. But you must know this. The cracked mirror is not a catastrophe, it is an opportunity. For the first time, you can see yourself without reflection. For the first time, you are not someone through another's eyes, but an independent soul. It's terrifying, because you too were addicted to reflection, to being the good one, the empath, the healer. So when you stop playing that role, not only do they fall into crisis, but the part of you addicted to being mirrored begins to tremble. You once needed their recognition to feel worthy. Now, as you withdraw, an emptiness appears, and the silence echoes like a chant inside a fallen temple. Yet within that silence, your true soul begins to speak. Jung called this moment, Nigredo, the dark stage of spiritual alchemy, where illusions dissolve so the soul can begin to reorganize itself. The narcissist cannot survive Nigredo, for they live off illusion. But you can walk through it because you were born for truth. The mirror crack marks the moment you stop being an accessory in someone else's story and begin the sacred journey of your own. When you don't react, they go frantic. They might curse, cry, or fall into eerie silence. All are attempts to reawaken your old role as their reflection. But understand this: your peace is the final mirror they cannot shatter. It forces them to see the emptiness within themselves so clearly it hurts. And in that pain, if any fragment of humanity remains, they may finally begin to look within. Otherwise, they'll leave to find another mirror, another person to reflect their illusion. What matters is not whether they change, but whether you continue to reflect. True power doesn't lie in escaping them. It lies in no longer needing that role to feel real. When you stop playing the mirror, you step out of the loop of power and reaction. You are no longer anyone's reflection, and you no longer need anyone's reflection to know you shine. When Jung said, "A person becomes whole when they realize they no longer need validation from anyone else," he was describing this moment, the moment your inner light becomes your only source of illumination. The moment you stop asking, "What do they think of me?" and start asking, "What do I think of myself when I am alone?" That is when the mirror is gone, yet you remain standing. And in that silent light, you realize you never needed them to be seen. They needed you to hide their darkness. The mirror crack is not only their first psychological strike, but also your first initiation. When they try to reshape your image, remember they are only wrestling with their fear of disappearing. You don't need to fight. You only need not to reflect. Let them see that the mirror has shattered and that you are no longer there, no longer an image, no longer a reaction, no longer a source of affirmation. Only the calm presence of a soul that has discovered its own reality. Because in the end, there is no victory greater than standing in silence, knowing that no one can shake you with a single look again. The broken mirror is not the end, it is the dawn of a new being. The moment you stop reflecting someone else's darkness and become the source of your own light. Tactic 2. The inversion assault. Reversing reality. If the mirror crack was the moment they realized you no longer reflect them, then the inversion assault is their attempt to bend the light so that you begin doubting whether what you see is real. This tactic requires no shouting, no rage, just a few carefully chosen sentences, as precise as a needle slipping into your awareness, injecting a subtle poison. Are you sure you're not being too harsh? You've changed lately. You're not as warm as you used to be. And just like that, you pause. You start re-examining yourself. They've succeeded. The narcissist knows that even if they can no longer control your behavior, they can still control the way you interpret that behavior. This is the essence of inversion, not changing the truth, but changing how you see the truth. It is the highest art of manipulation, not by force, but by distortion. Jung once said, "There is no greater suffering than to doubt one's own perceptions." They know this well. At this stage, you already have boundaries, awareness, and strength. You know you are no longer their mirror, but it's precisely this confidence that makes them choose a subtler path. They attack your moral compass, your compassion, your instinct to be good. They won't tell you you're wrong. They'll make you feel as if you've hurt them. They won't call you cruel. They'll simply lower their voice, and suddenly you hear guilt echoing inside. Now they become perfect rhetoricians. Their tone soft, sorrowful, measured. "I know you didn't mean it, but do you realize how small you made me feel?" Or, "I just miss how sweet and gentle you used to be. You feel so distant now." No accusations, just gentle disappointment. But that gentleness is the sharpest blade because it makes you turn it inward. Am I really becoming cold? Am I changing for the worse? And so you look again this time, not into a mirror that reflects them, but into one they've subtly warped for you to reflect yourself through their eyes. This is the mental labyrinth. You think you're introspecting, but you're actually seeing through the manipulator's gaze. This is cognitive hijacking. They don't need to control your actions, only the way you think about them. Carl Jung distinguished two forms of psychological possession: possession by desire and possession by guilt. Desire can be resisted, guilt cannot. Once you feel guilty, you hand yourself over. The inversion assault awakens conditional guilt in you planted long ago in childhood. The fear of upsetting others, the fear of being seen as cold, the fear of not being good. They only have to touch it gently and you do the rest. They understand your inner architecture better than you think. They remember your stories, how your parents misunderstood you, how you hated hurting anyone. They noticed how you apologize even when you've done nothing wrong. Now they weaponize that knowledge as tactical data, a detailed map of your psychology. When they say, "I'm sad," because you're not like you used to be, they're triggering the emotional region of loss attachment. When they say, "I miss the old you," they're awakening your bonding instinct. When they say, "I know you didn't mean to hurt me," they're planting the seed of guilt, and you will be the one watering it. The terrifying thing is that everything they say is half true. You have changed, but not in the way they describe. You stopped enduring. You stopped staying silent. But in the language of someone addicted to control, your silence becomes distance, your boundary becomes coldness, and your peace becomes apathy. They invert the meaning of things, turning light into shadow, and smile as you stumble, confused inside your own clarity. Remember this. The narcissist does not fear truth. They fear clarity. Truth can be twisted, but clarity cannot. They want you confused because confusion is their oxygen. They live in the in-between, where every motive can be doubted and every word reinterpreted. When you step into that fog, you lose your grounding, you start apologizing for what isn't wrong, and justifying what never needed justification. That is inversion, the reversal of energy. You become the one seeking approval from the person who wounded you. From victim, you are reshaped into the offender. From healer, you become the one who must fix your attitude. And the most elegant part of it all, they never say this directly. They let you conclude it yourself, punish yourself, and shrink just enough to fit the memory they miss. Jung once wrote, "When the shadow is not acknowledged, it tries to become moral. The unacknowledged shadow in them, the selfish, fearful, envious part, disguises itself as virtue. They no longer attack you through brutality, but through ethics, love, and concern. I just worry about you. I don't want you to lose your kind heart." They turn manipulation into prayer, and that is why it's harder to see than any insult. Listen long enough and you'll feel drained, not because they yell, but because you begin to feel guilty for simply being yourself. That's the mark that you're inside the inversion assault. You can no longer tell where kindness ends and false remorse begins. You start asking their questions, defending them in your mind, tightening the cage you just escaped. But if you stop, if you observe instead of react, you'll notice something strange. Every time you stay truly silent, their moral composure cracks. The mask of concern fractures, revealing the fear beneath the terror of being forgotten, of no longer being important, of losing the moral stage they built in your eyes. And in that moment, you see the truth of this tactic. They don't want you to feel guilty. They're terrified of being seen as the guilty one. The inversion assault is, at its core, a desperate attempt to save their self-image by swapping roles with you. When you feel guilty, they become innocent. When you apologize, they become noble. When you shrink, they stand tall. This is how their world works. Others must kneel for them to remain upright. You don't need anger to escape. You only need to see through the language. Each time they say, "I only want what's best for you," ask yourself, best for whom? Each time they say, "I'm sad you've changed," ask, are you sad because I'm free or because I'm no longer controllable? Each time they say, "I'm afraid of losing you," listen deeper. Do you fear losing me or losing your place at the center of me? That's how you reclaim the light of perception. No need to argue, no need to prove, just to know. Once you see clearly, every inversion collapses on its own. Darkness exists only when light wavers. When your light steadies, nothing can bend it anymore. The inversion assault is not meant to scare you. It's meant to reveal something profound. The one who made you doubt yourself was, in truth, terrified of doubting themselves. And once you understand that, you no longer need to answer, justify, or prove your goodness. You only need to stand still, look straight ahead, and know that every attempt to twist reality is proof that you've become too real for them to bear. Tactic 3, the compassion trap. Some traps don't snap shut with a click. They have no teeth, no rope, no force. They begin with a plea for help, and then you walk in by yourself. That's how the narcissist compassion trap works. Subtle, soft, and wrapped in the most beautiful thing about you, your capacity for empathy. After the storm of the inversion assault, once you're clear enough to tell right from wrong, they stop aiming at your logic. They pivot to your heart, the softest place, where you once believed that understanding someone was the same as loving them. They don't need to prove anything. They only need to stir pity. A sentence, a tone, a trembling glance, and you feel that familiar ache. Then you come back. Not for them, but for the part of you that can't bear to watch anyone suffer. Carl Jung once said, "No goodness is pure unless it has passed through its own darkness." It sounds simple, but the empath in a relationship with a narcissist is living proof. Within you lives something ancient, the inheritance of those who healed others with their own flesh and blood. You believe that if you love enough, understand enough, and wait long enough, the other person will change. That belief is a light, but it's also a gate the narcissist walks through. They are not seeking love. They are seeking healing energy. They don't need you to understand them, they need you to hurt with them so they don't have to feel their own pain. And when you bow your head and hold their hand in a moment of weakness, you think you're saving them. In truth, you're becoming an emotional container, a receptacle where they can pour fear, guilt, and emptiness without ever having to look at it. They're master storytellers of things that need saving. A painful childhood, a treacherous ex, a harsh father, a cold mother. When they share, it isn't to heal, it's to bind you to the role of savior. You start to believe that if you leave, they'll collapse. If you go silent, they'll die of loneliness. A sacred cord is formed. You feel you no longer have the right to choose. That's when the trap closes, not with control, but with compassion. Unlike fear, compassion doesn't make you run. It makes you stay. You stay to make sure they're okay, to see if they're sleeping, eating, if they need someone to talk to. You don't notice that right then they're siphoning back all the energy you reclaimed in your escape. Empaths don't usually fear being hurt. They fear hurting others. And the narcissist understands this like a mathematician understands a formula. They will use their pain as a chain not forged by orders but by tears. They know how to tremble on cue, how long to stay silent, how to drop half-finished sentences so you have to ask more. I'm fine. It's just no one really understands me. And it sounds like a sigh, but it's bait. You ask, what's wrong? They answer, it's nothing. You wouldn't understand. And just like that, you've stepped into the second loop of the trap, proving your goodness. This trap doesn't pull on ordinary ego. It hooks your moral ego, the part of you that needs to be a good person. You can't leave because leaving means you're cruel. You can't be cool or distant because distance means you've lost your heart. Slowly, you sacrifice yourself to preserve your own good image. You work in their place, listen without limits, give without stopping, and end up exhausted yet guilty at the thought of stopping. This is the most exquisite form of slavery, emotional servitude. No one forces you to stay. You stay because you believe leaving would betray your kindness. The compassion trap becomes a sacrifice ritual. You give energy, time, attention, and receive thank yous laced with guilt. I don't deserve you. They don't say it to set you free. They say it so you prove them wrong by staying, caring, and loving even more. Jung described the projection of the wounded archetype. When someone keeps summoning an image of needing rescue, the unconscious in you, the part that wants to heal your own past, activates. You see in them the weaker version of yourself. You want to help them through the pain no one helped you with. The tragedy is this. You're trying to heal yourself through someone who has no intention of healing. They know this. They don't need to look wicked. They only need to play pitiful. In the empath's emotional system, pitiful translates to innocent. You can't stay angry at someone who cries. But look closely. The tears don't have a soul. They're tools. They don't cry from pain. They cry to create pain in you. One day you'll wake up, look in the mirror, and see the old version of yourself you thought you left behind, tired, depleted, breathing someone else's air. You no longer hear your own voice because your ears are always open to theirs. You no longer know what you like or dislike because their emotions have flooded every space. You think you're in love, but in truth you're a lost soul performing a rescue mission. Escaping the compassion trap doesn't mean becoming cold or numb. It means distinguishing rescue from self-immolation. Jung called this the separation of the opposites, discerning true compassion from pathological compassion. True compassion has boundaries. It says, I see your pain, and I trust you to take responsibility for it. Pathological compassion says, I see your pain, let me bear it for you. One gives faith, the other gives away your soul. When you start asking who is responsible for this pain, you begin to disarm the trap. That question breaks the structure the narcissist relies on. They want you to believe that their pain is your duty. But the truth is, no one can heal anyone who does not want to heal. You can illuminate, but you cannot transform for them. One clear sign you've overcome this tactic is when you can witness their pain and remain steady. Not because you're heartless, but because you understand that some pains are manufactured to make others stay. You can still care without rescuing. You can empathize without dissolving. You can say, I understand you, but I cannot live your life for you. Then you realize the compassion trap was never truly about them. It was about your belief that love must save. When you release that belief, love can finally begin, not the love that rescues, but the love that liberates. The compassion trap is an initiation. If you pass it, you free yourself not only from a relationship, but from an ancient soul pattern, the compulsion to carry others as proof of your worth. When you stop, no one dies. Only the illusion does. And from those ashes, for the first time, you see kindness not as chains, but as a light that knows where to shine. Tactic 4. The nostalgic mirage. When apologies stop working and tears no longer sway you, the narcissist reaches for their most delicate weapon, memory. They know the present holds no place for them, so they retreat to the one realm you can't defend, the past. None of us truly resists memory. It looks harmless, yet it can bend time. One sentence, I miss that day when, can revive an entire dead universe. Nights full of laughter, warm embraces, moments when you believed love was real. When memory is invoked, your mind doesn't just recall, it relives. You return to the original feeling as if time never moved. That's when the nostalgic mirage begins. Jung wrote, memory doesn't only record events, it protects the illusions we aren't ready to lose. The narcissist understands this more deeply than you think. If they've lost all power in the present, they can still occupy your mind through the past. They don't have to recreate what happened, they only have to reframe it to their advantage. And they do it deftly. No threats, no sobbing, just remembering. I still remember that afternoon by the lake, the way you laughed, sunlight in your hair. I've never seen anyone so peaceful. It sounds harmless, but it tugs a hidden cord tied to a memory where you once felt safe. Unconsciously, you're not just recalling the scene, you're recalling the version of you that existed then. Soft, trusting, bright. They don't need to convince you to return to them. They only need to make you want to return to that you. That's the subtlety of the nostalgic mirage. It doesn't invite you back to them. It invites you back to the self you once were with them. And so you follow without noticing. What they don't mention is that back then was not as perfect as you remember. The human brain curates, affects it, erases painful details, and keeps the frames with good lighting. The narcissist, a skilled editor, simply stitches those frames together, cutting out the silence, the tears, the nights you endured. They rebuild a director's cut of love, where they are gentle, you are angelic, and everything fell apart due to a simple misunderstanding. You're being deceived not by them, but by your own memory. They say, I wish we could return to when things were simple. And you reply, yeah, we were different then. In that reply, you've unconsciously admitted there was something worth returning to. But look closely. Their simple refers to the time before you had boundaries, before you asked questions, before you recognized the game. Simple means convenient for them, and different means you woke up. The nostalgic mirage is the soul's light drug. It doesn't strike, it lulls. It softens you, opens you, and whispers, maybe this time they've changed. They haven't. Your memory has merely been stroked like touching an old scar you had stopped feeling. Jung described this as a regression of the psyche, the mind's retreat to the state before the wound. When pain forces us to build a wall, the psyche longs to return to the time before the wall, to remember what carefree felt like. The narcissist exploits that reflex. They give you the sense of going back to a former self, when in fact you're moving away from your true self, the one who learned to stand, discern, and guard your soul. They don't promise the future. They summon the past. They don't say we will, they say remember when we did. Their use of the past tense is a form of hypnosis. The past feels safe. It can't be verified. It can't be changed. It can only be felt. And in feeling, your reason dissolves. You might tell yourself, I'm just remembering. It's harmless. But memory is never neutral. It carries the emotional frequency of the moment it was formed. When you open that door, old energy floods in. Trust, softness, the habit of bowing your head. Linger in nostalgia too long, and you'll start justifying them, not because they deserve it, but because you can't bear to lose something that once felt beautiful. Infant, here's the paradox. We're not addicted to people. We're addicted to the feelings we had with them. The narcissist knows. They don't need to win you back. They just need you to remember long enough that you can't move on. They'll recall the details no one else would. The smell of morning coffee, the song you sang along to, the way you tilt your head when you laugh. Each detail is a tiny hook, and they cast dozens at once. You don't feel tied, you feel touched. Then you wake up and realize you're back in the same circle. Late night texts, just reminiscing calls, and slowly the old feelings revive, pulling you into the familiar maze. The narcissist doesn't need to say, "Come back to me." They only need you to forget why you left. That is the apex of the nostalgic mirage. They don't need logic. They need you to remember wrong. If you remember wrong, they win. This tactic is so delicate, it's hard to spot. There's no conflict, no yelling. It might even bring you to tears, not from pain, but from missing. But in those tears lies a danger. You're mourning an illusion, not a person. Jung said, "We do not live in the past, but the past lives in us." The narcissist uses this to resurrect themselves inside your mind. If they can't enter your present, they'll live in your memory. And when you remember, you unwittingly feed them not with actions, but with attention. You escaped with boundaries, but you only truly leave when you free your memory. Not by erasing it, but by seeing it in a new light, the light of truth. You can remember that cafe without remembering from the dependency of who you were. You can hear that song without the lump in your throat. When memory stops distorting, the mirage dissolves. Healing at this level is not forgetting, it is remembering accurately. Remember the scratch marks, the loneliness behind the smiles, the times you were convinced the fault was yours. When you remember in full, memory stops being a doorway for their return and becomes a flat mirror where you see the lesson you've survived. The nostalgic mirage is the gentlest tactic and the longest lasting. It doesn't aim to hurt you. It aims to soften you. And once softened, you forget that you were once strong. That's how they restart the cycle, as if nothing ever happened. When they say, "I miss you," answer in your heart, "I miss it too, and I've moved beyond it." When they say, "Those were beautiful days," smile, "Yes, because I didn't yet know where I was." When they say, "Let's just talk like old times," breathe and understand. That person is gone, and I won't resurrect her to be your mirror again. You break the mirage with awareness, not resistance. In the end, you'll understand that the past is not a place to return, it's a place to lay, to rest. When you do, the narcissist loses the last refuge they had, your memory. Tactic 5, the smear alchemy. When they can no longer possess your heart, the narcissist will seize the world around you. They understand that power doesn't only come from making you believe, it also comes from making others doubt. This is when they turn alchemist, not to turn iron into gold, but to turn truth into doubt, and doubt into a weapon. Carl Jung once wrote, "When the persona cracks, the shadow doesn't only flood inward, it spills outward, seeking refuge in the perceptions of others." The narcissist knows their mask is slipping no more control over you, no more reactions, no more supply. For them, that is the social death of the ego. They cannot bear the thought of you walking away in peace while they are left alone with their own silence. So they do the only thing they know. They burn your image to light theirs. At first, you won't notice. A vague remark at a party, a sigh in a message to mutual friends, "She's changed so much. I don't know what happened." Or softer still, "I don't blame her. I'm just sad. Maybe she's going through something." That's all. No attack, no accusation, just emotional doubt the fastest, spreading poison in any group. Then it spreads. One person hears, two retell. Those who once looked at you with admiration now regard you with sympathy. No one accuses you of anything, yet the atmosphere shifts. You become the topic of gentle concern. And the cruelest part is this: they always seem hurt when they speak of you. They wrap venom in the velvet of sorrow. Jung called this the projection of the rejected self, hurling what one cannot accept in oneself onto another. The narcissist throws their shadow onto you: selfishness, ambition, control, deceit. In the eyes of onlookers, you become them, and they become you. They don the costume of the victim, strap on the mask of virtue, and speak in the voice of the betrayed. You are recast as cold, changed, independent to the point of cruelty. Quote, "This is no longer a battlefield of feelings, but of language." Narcissists are masters of redefinition. They don't distort events, they distort context. If you keep silent to protect your boundaries, they say, "She's avoiding me." If you tell the truth, they say, "She's bad-mouthing me." If you keep your distance, they say, "She's still bitter." In this game, you cannot win. Every move is reinterpreted against you. The most frightening part, however, isn't being misunderstood. It's that you begin to doubt yourself. Their words echo through others until, at times, you think, was I really too harsh? Did I actually hurt them? Even the strongest ache when turned into a villain in the public eye. The narcissist knows this. That is where smear alchemy peaks. They make you see yourself through a tainted gaze. Picture them as a desperate director re-editing an old film, only this time you play the antagonist. What once were their wounds become scars you inflicted. What once were their apologies are replayed as proof you forced them. Acts you did out of love are recast as control, manipulation, calculation. They are not merely lying. They are restaging truth in a warped frame. And audiences believe because they watch feelings, not evidence. In this world, the one who looks more heartbroken is the one who is right. And the narcissist knows how to suffer beautifully. Beneath the smear lies a deeper psychology: ego self-preservation. Jung said, "The ego will destroy anything that threatens its illusion of control." When you left, you took the only mirror that told them, "This is who I am." Without you, they face existential emptiness. So they must rebuild your image, not to destroy you, but to save themselves from dissolution. If you are the villain, they remain the good one. If you betrayed, they remain loyal. If you are independent, they are the abandoned. Every storyline serves one purpose: preserve the self-image. The cruelest twist? You taught them the language of feeling. You shared your deepest pain. Now they wield that very language to narrate their story. They speak in your voice, using words you once offered only now to cast themselves as your victim. This is a sacred theft, the theft of the soul's voice. Why do this if the relationship is over? The answer is power's architecture. Narcissists don't care if you love or hate them. They fear only your independence from them. If they can't control your heart, they will control your reputation. They don't need you back, they just need to make sure no one else sees you with free eyes. That's why the smear campaign begins the moment you go silent. Your silence proves their influence is gone. So they make noise, loud noise, to fill the space you left. The only way to break this tactic is not counterattack, but abide in truth. Anything you say now is pointless, because people aren't listening with ears, they're listening with beliefs. Let time and consistency do what you cannot. Jung wrote, "Persona can be manufactured, but character is proven only by time." Don't scramble to fix your image. Live until it fixes itself. Those with depth will see. Those who don't are no longer worth holding. Let them speak. Every word they utter doesn't lower you. It exposes their fear. Fear that you still exist, still serene, still yourself without their validation. Each tale they craft is an admission that they cannot leave your orbit. You've exited the battle. They are still fighting a silhouette that no longer stands there. And one day, when the noise thins, the truth will stand like noon. Smearing is never an attack. It is a plea for help. The howl of a soul that has lost the capacity to be seen by truth and must therefore be seen by lies. When you understand this, anger fades. In its place comes a different compassion, not for them, but for the self who once thought you had to clear your name. You realize you don't need to win. When you are calm, they have already lost. When you do not explain, they vanish. And when you keep walking, though whispers trail behind your quiet existence becomes the anti-alchemy. It turns lies to dust and turns you back into light. Smear alchemy attacks the social layer of the self, but it is also where your truest freedom begins. Only when you no longer need to be seen correctly can you finally be seen by your own soul. And in that moment, the narcissist loses what they fear most, the power to define you. Tactic 6. The crisis theater. When every other strategy fails, when smearing doesn't shake you, nostalgia can't draw you back, and guilt no longer makes you bow, the narcissist unveils their final act. Tragedy. They become the suffering protagonist in a play they write, produce, and star in, while you, without consent, are cast as the savior. This is the crisis theater, a stage where emotions are mobilized, morality is tested, and reason burns in the fire of pity. Carl Jung once said, "What is not made conscious will manifest in our lives as fate." The narcissist is a living embodiment of that truth. When their inner world collapses, they cannot bear to face the void, so they project it outward, turning life itself into the theater of their breakdown. They need an audience, because no one can suffer in silence without signaling the pain, and they know no one detects distress as instinctively as you do. It begins with a harmless message. "I just got bad news," or "I don't feel well, I don't know if I'll make it." Sometimes it's illness, sometimes debt, sometimes an accident, sometimes a mental crisis. And you, the one who once loved them, whose heart is attuned to suffering, immediately feel the pang. You think, "I can't abandon someone who's hurting." And that's when the lights come up. What you don't see is that this isn't an event, it's a ritual. They aren't seeking genuine help, they're summoning energy. They don't need rescue, they need your presence in their energetic field to restore their lost role. The moment you reply, even with a simple, "Are you okay?" they've already won half the battle. What they want is not advice, but connection. The crisis theater is scripted with surgical intuition. They know exactly which flavor of pain resonates with you. If you've lost someone, they'll choose illness. If you've struggled financially, they'll choose debt. If you've ever feared abandonment, they'll choose loneliness. They always strike the emotional frequency that echoes deepest in your soul, as if they can read the emotional memories stored within you. The instant you empathize, the energy portal opens. From that moment, they are no longer alone, they have an audience. But unlike real tragedies, this play has no final act. Every time you think they've recovered, a new crisis appears. They never fully get better, because recovery would end your attention. Crisis becomes the anchor. Whenever you say, "You have to handle this yourself," they sigh, "I tried, but no one understands me." Whenever you pull back, they escalate, "I don't know how much longer I can take this." Jung once wrote, "Where pity is exploited, a shadow remains unilluminated." That shadow is the addiction to the savior role. The narcissist doesn't just manipulate you, they awaken the part of you that once believed, "Saving others proves my worth." Deep down, you're not just afraid of their pain, you're afraid of being heartless. And that fear draws you back into the drama. You don't return because of them, you return to preserve your moral identity. This theater has a clear structure. Act 1, pity. Act 2, obligation. Act 3, exhaustion. You begin with, "I just want to make sure he's okay." Then, "I can't abandon him." Finally, "I don't know what to do anymore." In that process, you lose sleep, grow anxious, go numb, and slowly, you slip back into your old role. The emotional carrier who feels so they don't have to. The tragedy is that while you genuinely worry for them, they are watching your reactions, measuring how much influence they still have. Every message you send, every sigh, every prayer is logged, still cares, still gives energy. To them, crisis is a pulse check for control. If you appear unmoved, they escalate. a worsening illness, a sudden accident, a betrayal by family. They weave the narrative with the precision of a screenwriter. They know when to disappear so you fear the worst, then reappear just as panic peaks like a ghost returning from the edge. They'll say, "I almost did something stupid, but then I thought of you." And once again, you feel chosen to save. Jung described this archetypal entanglement. When the victim and the rescuer merge, both become trapped in the karmic loop. The more you save, the more they perform. The more they perform, the more you feel compelled to save. The loop seals itself, disguised as compassion. Eventually, when you're drained and begin to realize what's happening, their tone changes from sorrow to rage. "I don't need your pity," they bark, though pity was their stage cue all along. This anger isn't real, it's the final test. They want to see if you'll revert to your old reflex, apologize, console, or re-engage, or if you've finally seen through the play. If you withdraw now without explanation, they escalate to the self-destruction act, a drastic gesture, a cryptic threat. "You might not hear from me again." This is the ultimate emotional ransom where they demand your attention in exchange for their survival. But even if they truly harm themselves, the deeper motive isn't despair, it's terror of vanishing from your reality. When they collapse, they don't suffer like ordinary people. They suffer from not being seen suffering. They would rather fake death than endure invisibility. This is the essence of crisis theater pain, performed as ritual to resurrect the dying ego. But if you awaken, you'll see they aren't just acting, they truly are in pain. It's just not the pain they describe. It's the pain of not being able to feel. That's the deepest tragedy. They stage pain to avoid the real one. Once you see this, anger dissolves. So does pity. All that remains is understanding, a quiet recognition of a distorted mirror, where both once played and both once lost themselves. You can't break this spell with logic or coldness, only with what Jung called differentiated compassion, a compassion with clear edges. You can say silently, "I see your pain, but I cannot live your life." You can send peace without sending energy. You can understand without merging. This is the boundary of the awakened soul. To care without rescuing. To empathize without absorption. Once you step off the stage, everything becomes clear. There was never a theater, only a desperate soul performing so as not to die in silence. And then something miraculous happens. Without an audience, the play loses its light. No spectators, no actor. They will find another stage, another empath still willing to feel, and you will watch them go without pain. Because you now understand, every theater exists only as long as there is an audience, and compassion, without the illumination of wisdom, becomes the electricity that powers endless tragedy. By this point, you haven't just freed yourself from them, you freed yourself from the part of you addicted to being the rescuer. That's when you reach what Jung called individuation, the wholeness of being, where you no longer play roles, but simply are. So when the next message arrives, you are not cold, you are calm. When they say, "No one understands me," you smile softly. No one needs to for you to live. When they say, "I can't live without you," you don't argue. You simply think, "You'll learn once I stop being your audience." And that is when the stage collapses, the lights go out, and you walk away not as a victor, but as someone truly free. Tactic 7, the resurrection hoax. Nothing is more dangerous than someone who has never awakened, but has learned to speak like the awakened. When you've gone far enough, when they see you have truly built a new world, peaceful, steady, bright, they realize there's no path left except pretending to become the very version you once begged for. They show up with a composed gaze and a slow voice, using words like self-awareness, healing, growth. They quote spiritual books, talk about karma, energy, and waking up after the dark night. At first listen, it seems as if this soul has truly walked through the night. But Jung warned, not every light comes from the sun. Some lamps are lit in caves to keep people from stepping outside. The narcissist understands that at your deepest level, you're not seeking love, you're seeking understanding. You suffered because they didn't understand, too shallow, too false, too foggy. So they use that very need to return. This time, they don't apologize. They understand you. They say everything you once longed to hear. I see why you left. I've faced the darkness in me. I know I hurt you, but I've been doing the work. Every line is polished, as if they just stepped out of a retreat or a profound spiritual journey. This is the resurrection hoax, the most refined version of emotional manipulation. It doesn't prey on fear or pity. It targets your spiritual convictions, the highest part of you. When they speak the language of awakening, your guard drops, because you believe only those who truly suffered can say such things. Here lies the danger. They haven't changed their nature, only their strategy. Jung called this the inflation of the spiritual ego. The ego does not disappear after suffering. It resurrects as the enlightened self. It still craves control, only now it wears humility as a costume. They no longer say you're wrong. They say, I understand why you reacted that way. They no longer criticize, they observe. They no longer play the victim, they play the one who learned the lesson. And in that role, they claim the higher ground again, this time not with power, but with light. You recognize this tactic not by actions, but by a faint unease in your chest. Part of you is moved. Maybe they really changed. But deeper down, you sense something off. Their light isn't warm. It doesn't radiate peace. It radiates a demand to be acknowledged. They recount their healing, not to share, but to make you regret leaving before their transformation. They speak of the darkness they overcame, but tucked inside is a subtle reminder. If you'd stayed, we could have walked through this together. The resurrection hoax has 3 layers. First, simulated wisdom. They copy the language of awareness, boundaries, karma, taking responsibility. But they don't live it. They cite it as proof. Second, reframed wounds. The past becomes mythology. Everything we went through was to awaken me. That line turns your pain into a prop for their hero's journey. Third, the spiritual invitation. Would you like to talk as 2 people who truly understand? The old door opens, only now it's labeled not love, but healing. Jung said, when the shadow becomes aware of itself, it does not disappear, it puts on angel's robes. That is this tactic, exactly. They no longer lie crudely, they lie with lofty ideas. They know you respect growth, consciousness, the courage to face oneself, so they wear that mask, not to be forgiven, but to be venerated. You'll see them post philosophically about the universe, energy, awakening, gratitude. They write with the tone of the enlightened. Thank you to the souls who taught me through pain. But between the lines hides something strange. They never mention their faults without implying they've now surpassed you. I've learned to release those who are still stuck in the past. It sounds like wisdom. It's actually mockery. The resurrection hoax is a power grab in spiritual clothing. It says, I don't need you anymore. I've transcended you. Its real aim is to make you feel small and outdated, so you'll try to prove you've evolved too. If you react, if you comment, or send even one admiring line like, you've really changed, they instantly recover what they want, your reaction. The stage restarts, just with a new backdrop. Its danger is that it borrows light to conceal shadow. You can't attack it. It appears so sincere. You can't criticize it. Every statement is true on the surface. But if you trust your intuition, you sense the energy isn't clean. They speak of letting go, yet need you to witness their letting go. They preach non-attachment, yet still compare. They profess unconditional love, provided you text first. The only antidote is aware silence. Not the silence of hurt, but the silence of having seen through it. When you don't react, they will amplify their awakening. They may send blessings, gifts, even a long apology letter. Remember, a real apology needs no audience. Theirs always needs a stage. Every act of atonement carries performative energy. They are not repentant. They're staging a final role, the one who was wrong and is now redeemed. Jung called this pseudo-spiritual mirroring when the ego doesn't dissolve, but crowns itself as the soul. It imitates every sign of light, except true stillness. You will never see them quiet. They speak of meditation, but never sit. They speak of awareness, but still need to prove. True light never seeks applause. Only counterfeit light requires a crowd. One day you'll realize they are no different in darkness, or in light, they've merely changed the color of control. In darkness, they want you afraid. In light, they want you in awe. Both serve the same aim, to keep you in orbit. And you, once you've gone far enough, will simply smile. You don't declare them fake or real. You understand that no one can be reborn for real without first truly dying in the darkness of their own soul. So you need prove nothing. You let them awaken in their way without being their witness. Your light no longer needs to be seen. It only needs to be lived. That is the true end of the game. When you no longer need their change to validate your journey, they lose the reason to keep performing. Then the irony arrives. Your genuine light becomes the one mirror they cannot bear to face. When they say, "I've changed," you answer inwardly, "So have I, and I need no certificate." When they say, "I hope for forgiveness," you think, "I forgave, but we won't begin again." When they say, "I've awakened," you remain quiet. I don't need to know where you are on your path, because mine no longer depends on you. That is when the real rebirth happens not in them, but in you. Tactic 8. The ghost return. Not every return has a shape. Some returns are only a tremor in the air, a frequency you feel, though there's no text, no call, no clear sign. You're living in peace, and suddenly one morning, a memory rises for no reason. An old song randomly pops up online. A friend mentions their name. You open your phone and see they've accidentally viewed your story. No words, no apology, no crisis, just a quiet presence strong enough to make your heart quiver. That's when the ghost returns. The narcissist knows that silent energy haunts more deeply than 1,000 words. If they can't step into your life through action, they can linger in your mind through presence. Presence doesn't need a body, only a prompt. A like on an old post, a hidden account following you, a recycled photo with a covert symbol, a cryptic quote. All of it is designed to trigger your emotional memory, the software not yet fully uninstalled. Carl Jung wrote, "What we do not bring to consciousness appears outside as fate." The narcissist is the shadow of your unconscious, the embodiment of what you once couldn't face. Attachment, the fear of loneliness, unfinished memories. When you go quiet, they cannot bear the void, so they appear not with flesh, but with frequency. They don't speak, but they know you'll feel. They don't act, but they know you'll notice. And the cruel truth is, it's enough for them that you think of them. A ghost doesn't need to enter the house. It only needs you to open your mind to check if anyone's at the door. The instant you think of them, they've succeeded. You believe you're maintaining no contact, but in the energetic world, they've slipped in through the back door of the unconscious. They don't need direct attention. In fact, they prefer being silently hated because hate is still connection. They know you still peek, still check, still wonder, are they happy? In this game, they manipulate through absence. If Tactic 7 was borrowed light, Tactic 8 is deliberate darkness. When they surface indirectly through a post, a mutual contact, a dream, you'll ask, is it coincidence or intentional? The answer, both. The unconscious generates synchronicities, meaningful coincidences, especially where two souls were strongly entangled. Consciously or not, they transmit signals, thinking of you, talking about you, stalking, repeating your name in their mind, and you, attuned and sensitive, pick up the frequency. This is the ghost link, the emotional cord not yet cut. It isn't love, nor quite hate. It's the residual charge of an old interaction, what Jung called a complex, a psychological knot yet to be integrated. When you feel it, you assume you're still attached. In truth, you're perceiving old energy that hasn't fully dispersed. They know this. They don't need to break no contact, they just need to pass by, to make you waver. They feed on that reaction. Because attention, energy, even negative, is still energy. To them, your continued sensation of their existence equals, I still have power. Sometimes they won't do anything at all. They'll simply think of you hard enough to shake the energetic field between you. If you haven't truly severed, you feel a someone brushing past your heart. You try not to think, but the cord hums. Jung described this as psychic residue, the energetic soot of a bond not yet cleansed, the smoke after a fire. No flames, but still enough to make you cough. The ghost return needs no performance, only presence. They know you're sensitive to energy, so they play on that channel. If you trust intuition, they'll weaponize intuition against you, blurring the line between spiritual perception and the echo of old wounds. In truth, they cannot leave not out of love, but because they can't bear their absence in someone else's mind. Narcissists exist by being mirrored. When you stop reflecting, they vanish, and to them, vanishing is worse than death, so they choose to be a shadow. Half existence is better than none. For you, this is the highest test of freedom. No more pleading, no more crises, only ambiguous presence. Because it's ambiguous, it easily confuses the mind. You're no longer contending with them, but with your own energetic memory. Old scenes, old feelings, old frequencies return to test whether you have truly died to the past. Jung said, liberation does not come from killing the darkness, but from ceasing to believe it still has power. That is the key. You don't need to block, erase, or run. You need only to see clearly. Every sign is the reflex of dissolving energy. They haven't truly returned. They're merely colliding with the empty space where you once lived inside them. When you don't react, no checking accounts, no reading into hints, no sending reflected energy, the old field collapses on its own. A ghost exists only where there is fear. When you stop fearing, it fades. A sign you've passed this test. You can notice their presence and feel nothing. No anger, no ache, no quiver, just peace. Your soul has shifted frequency. Their signal can't dock anymore. You are no longer on their wavelength. Then they truly disappear, not because you blocked them, but because you rose beyond the band where they exist. Your silence is no longer a wall, it's your new reality. They may brush past again through a coincidence, a memory, even a dream, but you'll experience it like an old film you once loved and no longer relate to. You remember, but you no longer believe. That's when the ghost truly dies. Not because you expelled it, but because it has nowhere left to cling. Tactic 9, the new mirror. Nothing terrifies a narcissist more than your peace. In their world, your calm is a funeral for their illusion. When you don't react, don't rage, don't need, they no longer exist at the center of your mind. For them, that is ego collapse. But narcissists never agree to vanish. When they can't see themselves in you, they create a new mirror. That mirror's name is the new person. Soon after you leave, you see posts with someone else. Radiant smiles, hands clasped, captions overflowing with peace, gratitude to the universe, true love. You see phrases like healing partner, mature love, what I'd been seeking finally arrived. In that moment, a part of you, though wise, still stings. You once held their hand in the rain, believed those words, were the chosen one. Jung said, the ego never sees itself. It knows itself only through reflection in others. For the narcissist, others are the mirrors of the ego. When you shatter that mirror with silence, they can't endure the loss of image. They don't truly need a new person, they need a new mirror. That person isn't love, they're a tool to resurrect the illusion. But the new mirror is not merely replacement, it is choreography. They don't just seek a fresh relationship, they want you to see their happiness. The conviction, I still affect you, is the last fuel keeping them alive. They don't need to love the new partner. They need to make you waver. Here's the method. They pick someone similar to you, sometimes in looks, sometimes profession, sometimes vibe. A first act replica, but edited, more compliant, easier to guide, less resistant. They recreate your old activities, the same locations, the same style now with extra hearts and peace emojis. They don't just love, they broadcast love. Every post, every story, every line is a message addressed indirectly to you. See, I've changed. It's not that I couldn't love you, just weren't calm enough. This one is different. She understands me. They don't need to say your name, everything is written for you. The tactic is exquisitely cruel. They don't insult you to hurt you, they exalt someone else so you'll compare yourself. They don't blame, they prove. And in this theater, you become an unwilling audience, not in the story, yet pulled back by the gaze. Jung described this as the reenactment of the original complex. They replay the entire previous relationship with a new partner to prove the problem wasn't them. The new person isn't a companion, they're evidence. They're used to rewrite history. I can love, you just weren't patient enough. And you, who know them best, recognize the truth. Every photo, every happiness is a copy. The eyes are the same, the voice the same. Even the lines they tell the new person are the ones they told you word for word only. The backdrop has changed. Your pain isn't that they love someone else. It's that they never loved anyone, including you, as a real person. A narcissist loves the chessboard like a player loves the game, not because the pieces have souls, but because the game confirms victory. When you left, they lost the board. The new person is the replacement match. There is a deeper layer, mirroring through envy. Knowing you won't look, they create circumstances that make others look for you. They go public, flaunt, accidentally, send a misdirected message, or let a mutual casually mention something. They don't just want you to see, they want you to imagine the rest. Imagination is the sharpest weapon. It makes you bleed over things that never happened. Jung said, "When we are possessed by an image, it governs our inner world." That's the aim of the new mirror, to let the image, they're happy without you, colonize your mind so you forget you left for the sake of truth and start fighting an illusion. But as with every performance, the new mirror starts to crack. The new partner slowly realizes they aren't loved as a person, but as a role already rehearsed. The repeated lines, the templated gestures, the quiet after the show. Eventually they begin to question, and the new mirror reflects the narcissist's worst fear, a replica of the truth. They see in the new partner what they once saw in you. Tired eyes, fractured trust, the feeling of being emptied. That is when the production begins to fall apart. The narcissist never takes responsibility. They switch props. As the new mirror fractures, they come searching for your old gaze to reflect themselves again. You may receive a hinting message. I finally understand what you used to say. That is the first sign of the boomerang. See, the new mirror was never about the new person. It's about them, someone who cannot bear to watch themselves dissolve when unreflected. The new one is material. You are the archetype. When the archetype no longer vibrates, the copy collapses. You might ask, why won't they leave me alone? The answer lies in the ego's architecture. The ego exists only with an object to define against. When you go silent, they lose their center and must manufacture another. But you are no longer there to believe, react, or feel defeated. That, precisely, is your victory. When you've truly moved on, you see their new mirror not with pain, but with understanding. You perceive two souls still trapped in the play you once left. You no longer want to expose anything, nor wait for the new person to see the real them. You understand, no one wakes another. Each must see when their own mirror cracks. And when they lose both you and the new mirror, the worst finally happens. They must face the emptiness with no reflection to stand in. That is when the real darkness begins. You don't need to return to teach a lesson. Time and consequence will do that. Your only task is to live deeply in your peace so your light ceases to prove, and simply is the presence of a soul no longer run by image. When they look at you again, not through screens or memories, but with bare eyes, they will see what they never saw. You are no longer a mirror. You are light. And light reflects no one. It only reveals everything. Tactic 10. The final collapse. No one can play God forever in a fabricated world. Sooner or later, every role grows weary, every illusion wears thin, and every mirror must shatter. For the narcissist, this is the moment when there's no one left to manipulate, no one left to reflect them, no audience to believe the story they tell. This is the final collapse, the stage Jung called psychic death, the spiritual death of the ego. On the surface, they may still smile, still fall in love with someone new, still pretend to be happy, but the light in their eyes dims. The once arrogant gaze turns empty. They drift from relationship to relationship, from new goals to self-proclaimed healing journeys, and yet everything ends the same way. No one is enough to reflect back the image they need to believe. That's when the inner citadel crumbles. Without you, they lose the false sun, the borrowed energy that once lit the hallucination called I. They don't realize that all along they've been living on credit, not essence. When the current is cut, darkness floods in. First panic, then numbness, and finally freeze. The world begins to feel weightless. Nothing pulls them back to reality. In the chaos, they do the only familiar thing. They try to return. Not out of love, not out of longing, out of fear of sitting alone in the darkness of their own psyche, fear of facing what they once flung onto others, the hollow self. They will try everything. Belated apologies, long letters, cryptic posts, even strange coincidences. But this time is different. This time, you no longer live at that frequency. Because your journey didn't end with getting over a narcissist. It continued into getting over the part of you that once needed them. When your silence is no longer proof but simple sufficiency, when you don't speak because nothing needs saying, you have crossed the threshold Jung called individuation, the soul's return to itself. You don't seek love, justice, or revenge, you seek truth. And that truth is not tragic, it is quiet, clear, and asks no one to witness you. In the narcissist's inner world, you remain the shadow. In yours, they have become a neutral memory. The name that once made your hands shake is now only a sound. The image that once hurt is now only a lesson. No hate, no tenderness, only clarity. In that instant, the cycle is cut. For in every bond between empath and narcissist, one soul must break the loop to free both. That soul is you. Not by conquest, but by conscious compassion. Jung said, "We do not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." The narcissist's final collapse, therefore, doesn't come from their defeat. It comes from your lucidity. When you can see them without reacting, understand without judging, let them pass without counter-energy, you reclaim the whole power of your soul. In true inner work, this is called alchemy transformation. The darkness you once feared becomes compost for the soul's growth. You no longer need counterfeit light, because the light within you is enough. As for them, they enter their own new cycle, where there is no one to blame, no one to reflect, and they are forced to face the one thing they've fled all their life: emptiness. This is their nigredo, the black phase of alchemy, where base metal is fired until it melts. Some souls awaken there. Others keep running, staging new plays. Either way, it no longer concerns you. Because you have crossed over, you no longer see them as the villain, but as part of humanity, still learning to see itself. You understand they are neither truly strong nor truly cruel. They are simply too afraid to love for real. That fear turned them into a monster. Once you realize love cannot be killed, only distorted, you no longer need to fix anyone. Then the miracle happens. Peace no longer depends on anyone. It becomes your natural state. No contact is no longer a tactic, but no resonance, no shared frequency. You don't need to block them. Your energy is simply too high to reach. They may say your name, but your name no longer lives in their world. That is true freedom. Not freedom from another person, but freedom from the hall of mirrors. You no longer need anyone to see you, no love to verify you, no victory to prove you're enough. You are the witness of yourself, and that makes everything else small. They will try to return once, twice, 10 times through guilt, pity, memory, counterfeit light. Every time they meet something unknown to them, silence that is no longer wounded. Your silence now is steady, not cold. It doesn't oppose, it transcends. It's not speaking, it's not needing. In that moment, they understand not with the mind but with the soul that the game is over. Not because you won, but because you left the board. All that remains is their darkness reflecting only itself. And that is what every narcissist fears most, not losing you, but losing the audience to their illusion. You walk on carrying no hatred, only the light of awareness. All the pain becomes gold, as in alchemy. Every crack in your heart becomes a seam of light for the soul to breathe through. Everything they once used to break you becomes raw material for your freedom. And when you stand there calm, quiet, needing to prove nothing, you become living proof of Jung's words. One who has looked into their own darkness no longer fears any darkness. The narcissist's final collapse, then, is not their tragedy, it is your rebirth. In the end, you realize there are no villains, only souls that haven't yet learned how to love. There are no victories, only homecomings. What you thought was a battle with a narcissist was, in truth, a passage through your own darkness, through the places where you once confused love with proof, kindness with surrender, silence with fear. Every pain was not a punishment, but a purification rite. Every heartbreak was not meant to destroy you, but to separate you from the illusion you once mistook for love. Carl Jung once said, "No one reaches enlightenment by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." And that's what you did with blood, with tears, with a silence no one understood. When you chose not to react anymore, it wasn't weakness, it was clarity. You saw that reaction was the last chain tying you to an old prison. When you chose silence, you didn't lose, you awakened. When you no longer needed to prove you were good, you finally became good. That's when every tactic of the narcissist collapses. Not because they repent, but because there are no longer any waves for them to ride, no energy left to feed on, no ego left to mirror. They may still call your name, but the sound only echoes into emptiness, because you are no longer there, not in their memory, not in their fear, not in their dreams. You've stepped off the map of their known world, and that is true freedom. Freedom is not forgetting, it's remembering and still feeling peace. It's not the absence of pain, it's looking at pain the way you'd watch a sunset, knowing it was once brilliant, but no longer wishing to hold it. It's not forgiving them, it's forgiving yourself, for playing savior, for believing you had to bring light to someone else. When your soul reaches this point, you no longer need protection, because there's nothing left to lose. You no longer need to prove you've healed, because healing is no longer a goal, it's a natural state. You simply live gently, fully, quietly. Your light is no longer a torch you raise in the dark for others to see. It's a candle placed within your own heart, steady, warm, eternal. People ask, what happens after the narcissist collapses? The truth is simple. Nothing worth watching. Their collapse is only the natural consequence of your light no longer reflecting them. They dissolve into their own shadow, while you become the light you once searched for in them. This is not victory. This is transformation. When you no longer need to be seen to exist, you become what Jung called the self, the true center of the soul, where light and shadow no longer fight but merge into wholeness. You realize love never dies. It only changes form. It leaves the wrong vessel and returns to its rightful home within you. From that moment, you step out of the cycle of victim, rescuer, mirror. You become the witness of your own story, a soul who has walked through the labyrinth of darkness, through every door of manipulation, through every illusion of healing, and found the truth at the center. No one can destroy you, because you never belonged to them. And if someone asks, how do you know you healed? Smile and say, when I no longer need them to suffer for me to be at peace. Remember, every soul must one day meet a narcissist to learn how to return to its true self. They are the most severe teacher the universe sends to force you to choose, keep reflecting illusions, or become real light. And when you choose real light, the universe opens a new path, one beyond power games, where only pure presence remains. This journey doesn't end in pain, it ends in sovereignty. That's why you were placed in that encounter, not to lose, but to awaken. Not to be broken, but to remember. The light you sought in another was never gone from you. So if you're still here, hearing these words, know this. You didn't just survive, you're transmuted. And the narcissist, whether they know it or not, fulfilled their role in this soul play. They were the fire, and you are the gold. Gold does not fear fire. Gold only needs enough heat to remember what it is. And now that the fire is gone, you still shine.